Our next question, Jim, on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Scott Burton, Emo ECW Mark Trash.
Okay.
What would you do in the territories if a homesteaded babyface was stale and needed a heel turn, but wasn't good at calling a match? Or what if you bring a new guy into the territory as a heel only to find out he couldn't call a match?
Well, that would be easier. You'd just fucking get rid of him. No, it was a standard rule of thumb, but not hard and fast, that the heel calls the match. Usually it was just done that way because, especially since the heel's probably, getting more of his ass kicked, at least he can call his own ass kicking, or he might be the more experienced guy. But obviously, if you had a underneath heel and a veteran superstar babyface that had just come in that was getting some wins on the card, well, then that star would call the match. And it's all over the place. And it depends on who the people are. But so if you brought some guy in and he couldn't fucking call a match with somebody, you probably decided you made a mistake bringing him in. If you were going to turn somebody, I can think, for example, Koko Ware, this is perfect. Because a lot of people also talk about or ask about who people today don't think were great in the ring, but at one time they were. You just didn't see it. It was Koko. Because a lot of people think of the bird gimmick, and he, and I like Koko, but he went to New York and he got fat and lazy and did the bird dance thing a lot. And, and it wasn't the Koko Ware that we saw in Memphis when he first got over. But the same thing, he had been broken in as a babyface, and he started out, I think his first day on TV was doing a job for Joe LeDuc, I think. So, but even then you could tell he was in shape, and even though he was short, he had the legs, those goddamn thighs, and his leaping ability, and he moved better. Some job guys would get in the ring and move like a sack of wet hammers, but Koko, he took a bump, it looked good. You knew he had some potential. But because he stayed in the Memphis territory, he was always a babyface. And even when they try to push him as a babyface, it wasn't different enough. That's Koko. He had been pigeonholed in people's heads as an underneath guy because they had seen him since he was an underneath fucking guy from the very beginning. But then they switched him heel, put him with Jimmy Hart's First Family, shaved his head, changed his name to Sweet Brown Sugar, which, of course, Skip Young had been doing in Florida, and that's the time when Lawler was going down to Florida a little bit and got the idea, right? And all of a sudden, he's so different. He's got no hair, and he's with the First Family, and Koko was never a great promo when he was young, and as a babyface, what do you have to talk about? But now as a heel, he can say a few things, let Jimmy take some of it. He can talk about how Lawler kept him down, blah, blah, blah. But in the ring, he was incredible. And that's how he was able to get over in Memphis finally, was as a heel and doing all that shit. Whether it was, he was first worked a program with Lawler, so naturally he's doing Lawler's fist drop off the top, but he would jump 3 or 4 feet up off the top turnbuckle and go halfway across the ring. Or the fucking drop kicks off the top rope, or the big bumps he took. When Lawler knocked him over the top rope backwards, he fucking flew. And he'd be thrown through the ropes and hardly touch shit. He was insane because he was getting his first big push, and all that shit got him over. And then when he teamed with Bobby, Sugar and Eaton were an incredible team that nobody but Memphis was seeing. But that's where, if you remember the Vegematic, right?
Yeah.
Well, Bobby and Koko had done a version of a thing where Koko got the guy in the bear hug and leaned him out, and Bobby came off with the knee drop to the chest. But it didn't look as good because they didn't really practice the lean out. So he was just kind of at a bear hug leaning the guy over. So Bobby didn't have a lot of area, and the knee Bobby had to hold up because he was so far off the ground, and it didn't come together. But I remembered when Bobby and Stan were teaming that they had done that, and Stan had that freaky spring in his legs, but he was very nimble. That's why I always had him doing things like jumping over the top rope. He was so graceful. So they'd do the blind tag, and Bobby would come off the ropes and baseball slide under the rope, and Stan would leap nimbly over the top. And when the babyface turned around, he'd fucking clothesline him. Or Stan could just had a great vertical leap. Well, in this case, he had a deep squat. So if Stan got the bear hug on the guy and leaned him out and had that deep squat where he was almost like a foot off the ground, right? Level out. And Bobby comes off with the leg, it's boom, boom. And it looked devastating. So that's where that came from. But anyway, Koko was fucking tremendous in the ring during that run in Memphis. And then when he got with Norvell Austin as the PYTs, they were doing a lot of the gimmick. And they actually got a spot, in Louisiana, and I think they were in Dallas and a few other places. Florida. So he was starting to travel around a little bit, but then as soon as he went to the WWF, he gained weight and lost his fucking oomph, I think. And then he was always, after that, was kind of presented as, once again, a guy on the card. So, but athletically, when he was young and motivated, holy shit. And anyway, that kind of turned, even if Koko couldn't call a heel match, he was working with Lawler. So Lawler was going to call the match anyway, but he learned how to be a heel that way. And Koko's the one with Lawler has that hand-eye coordination where he doesn't slap when he punches, he slaps when he gets punched. He had such incredible coordination, he'd do a spot where the guy would back him up in the corner and put his left hand on Lawler's chin and draw back with his right hand and throw this big haymaker right to the face, right? And when he did that, Lawler simultaneously would slap the guy on his side, but you would see the fist in the face, and Lawler would sell it that way, and you'd hear the smack, and holy shit, right? It took me several times to figure it out, watching close at ringside. But the first time he starts working with Koko, Koko's just switched heels, so he's never punched Lawler before. Koko pushes Lawler back in the corner, draws back, hits him with that big right hand, and Lawler slaps Koko's side. And Koko bent over and sold it and started selling like, oh, he stopped me. Oh, my God. And it blew the whole thing, at least in that building.
I was like, remember when Koko and Bobby with Jimmy had a confrontation with the Sheep Herders, the two heel teams in the studio?
Yes. And that was, people liked seeing the First Family, even that they hated to love them, because if they were against other heels, they were so exciting. But then because they were with Jimmy when they're against the baby faces, they could still keep their heat. And then Bobby, when Koko then, who was it now? Goddamn, how did they switch this? It was Koko switched back babyface to team with Lawler, and they had matches with Bobby Eaton and Sabu, the original Sabu, Koko Samoa. And they fought all over the fucking Coliseum, all over the building, wherever they were at, and used the tables in the ring and all that bullshit. It was just crazy. A completely different kind of match than Lawler had with Koko, where they were all high spot matches. And they kept things fresh that way. But after that, to the original question, when they turned Koko and then he was in those matches and with that group of people, then he learned how to do them. And then he could go and call them after that. So if you've got a green guy that can't call a match, but you can freshen him up, you put him in with a veteran that'll teach him.